This morning we're going to talk about MRP. This is not a real controversial area. MRP is pretty standard inside of SAP. You don't see a whole lot of modifications to it. It's the core engine, you know, in SAP and also in any ERP system. MRP is kind of the guts of, you know, what am I going to make, when am I going to make it, what am I going to buy. So generally, the goal in any of these OVOs is we obviously want all the plants using MRP. If there's any calculations going on off of spreadsheets and uploads and downloads to figure out what to make things, we try to say, obviously, we want MRP to be the engine of what do we make and what do we buy. Okay, so MRP, Material Requirements Planning. So what does MRP do, just as a question, what does MRP do with capacity? Any thoughts? How does MRP handle capacity?
Well, mainly have all the database in terms of inventory, planning data, planning parameters, and to make the explosion of the demand.
Yeah.
Then calculates the needs versus what we have. And there are the result of the MRP exercise is a PO or a work order.
Absolutely. Great. Is MRP going to adjust itself based on the fact that you're short capacity in some areas?
No.
Right. So the short answer is MRP doesn't care about capacity. It doesn't care that you don't have enough people. It doesn't care that you don't have enough equipment. MRP is unconstrained. It's infinite. It assumes infinite capacity to make, infinite capacity to buy things. There are tools that help you show that what MRP is wanting, you can't do, but MRP itself is not going to adjust its plan because you have capacity problems. So MRP is unconstrained, material requirements planning. This is what you need to make or buy. Whether you can do it or not, that's more analysis through capacity planning. So, material requirements planning, we said MRP, it's basically based on a demand profile program. What do we need to make and what do I need to buy? Okay, we're going to look at the mechanics of the planning run, the planning file, talk about the three ways you can process your MRP run, net change, or whether it's a regen or net planning. Some of the control fields in the MRP, parameters when we run MRP at night or when you run MRP singly, and how do they impact the exception messages. And we have a little bit at the end talking about lot sizing. We're not going to get in here to safety stocks, but we'll talk a little bit about lot sizing, because the two biggest contributors when we look at our red line graphs of why do we have dead stock are basically safety stock and lot sizing. Those are the two things we're looking at first. When my red line graphs aren't where I want them to be, is looking at the planning parameters, which include safety stock and lot sizing, right? Okay, so MRP, plan ahead to arrange for material availability. The system calculates what we have to buy, when, and in what amounts, and what do we have to make. Okay, so MRP in the whole supply chain, we start at the top with SD. If we have sales orders coming in, independent requirements are important, right? Independent requirements are our forecast. So especially if we make to stock, we ought to be driving things through a forecast. If we make to order, forecast is kind of optional in that the forecast would drive procurement, but make to order, you're basically driving sales orders, right? Sales orders are the driver. So here, do we have both? You have make to stock and make to order? Yeah. Okay, let's go. Yeah, and in make to stock, are we driving things with a sales forecast in general? Yeah. Okay. What about make to order?
It depends on the plan.
Okay.
We have some that are being driven by forecast or make to order.
Okay. Component purchasing, right? Component purchasing.
Finished goods.
We have a handful of finished goods parts that are driving make to stock, forecast, and production orders. We don't have any make to order forecasting.
Okay. Yeah, if you're forecasting generally in make to order, the purpose of a forecast in make to order is to procure things at lower levels. So when those sales orders do come in, you can quickly assemble it So the forecast in a make-to-order is not to drive your finished goods, it's to drive procurement of components so you can quickly turn it around when the sales order arrive. Otherwise, you'd have to buy everything, when it is. So that's usually the only purpose of forecasting in make-to-order. Make-to-stock, you're making it. Make-to-stock, you're making it based on that forecast. Okay, so MRP generates your dependent requirements, kicks out planned orders or requisitions, and those are going to turn into production orders or purchase orders. So that's pretty much your standard MRP process. Any questions on so far? Are all plants up on MRP and actively using MRP, or pretty much? Okay. Okay, single versus total. So total planning is when we run that at night. What time does that run here? Noon, midnight, 2 a.m.? When does MRP run nightly? Every night? What time?
After midnight.
After midnight sometimes? Okay. Okay, so that is going to run in a batch job pretty much, after midnight every night. But if a planner wants to see something immediately, you have your MDO2 that you're going to run instantly if you really want to see something quickly and see the results. Okay, so single item, multi-level, we blow through the whole BOM structure, single item, single level, which you don't see a lot. That's if you just want to plan one level and you don't want to blow it down any further. You can run that. But typically we're doing single item, multi-level, and going through the whole bill of material structure. Okay. Okay, the planning file. Is anybody familiar with the planning file or what it does? Any thoughts? Anybody heard of the planning file? Okay. So when you're running net change planning says, when I run MRP every night, it doesn't run on every single material. It doesn't run all 28,000 materials in a plant and recalculate everything. Net change planning says, I am only going to run MRP on materials where something has changed in the planning situation. Okay, who figures out what has changed in the planning situation? How does the system know? Well, behind the scenes, MRP has change pointers and indicators that put a little checkbox in this thing called the planning file. So the planning file gets a little X in there and says, something changed. Stock changed. Maybe data in my material master changed. Something in the planning situation changed, and MRP has the smarts to know. It has a whole checklist that says, if any of these things change, you need to run MRP on me material tonight. If there's no change, MRP's not going to run on that. Okay, so
There's an exception. They run nickel every night.
they run regen every night. Okay, lots of horsepower there. Better get on HANA. Okay, so anyway. So planning file is kind of the checklist of, hey, I'm running MRP on these and these other ones, nothing changed. Skip it, it may change again. Then, monthly or quarterly, we'll get into the other ones running Nupal and the other such. So the planning file, you generate it once, and then MRP takes care of putting the checks there when it needs them to know what materials have changed, and I need to run. So when I run that change, looks at the planning file, and MRP is going to touch that, recalculate that material. So the planning file gets up once, you can run a consistency check on it. After that, MRP takes care of itself in managing that planning file. Set up new materials, MRP is smart enough to know, new material, I need to add it to the planning file. So you don't really need to manipulate this much, but you can display it. You can run consistency checks once in a while when you have these obsolescences. You might want to take something out of the planning file if it's obsolete, because MRP might not automatically remove it. So there's some program consistency check you can run that says, hey, this is obsolete. It's still in the planning file, and I'm still trying to plan it. It's just going to give you extra exception messages. So there's some checks you can run to get things out of the planning file where you don't want MRP looking at them anymore anyway. Okay. So there's your planning file. Material undergoes a change relevant to MRP, and MRP knows what all those changes are. Okay? And then it runs, puts an entry to planning file, and runs MRP, and then resets it. So your MBS and MRP process flow, the planning file, MRP looks at it. It checks whether your current requirements are covered by warehouse stock. If it's not, it says, you have to, I got to calculate you a procurement And procurement could be make or buy. It says you got a shortage, okay, I need to make or buy something. Then it looks at your lot sizing. And it says, once I decide I got to make or buy something, how much? It looks at your lot sizing. Is it fixed lot sizing? Is it active EX? Is it min-max? It looks at all kinds. Is economic order quantity? So as soon as it knows it has to make or buy something, there's where lot sizing comes in. Okay? Carries out scheduling, looks at your routings, calculates the start and finish date of your production orders. And for requisitions, it looks at your planned delivery times and goes through its whole logic. Okay? So then it generates your MRP list, and that's where you have your MDO6, and generates the exceptions where it says, tried to do this, you need to move something in, you need to move something out, and we're actively looking at those exception messages. So net change planning, we kind of just talked about. Net change is basically saying I'm not running everything, I'm only looking for things that have had a change relevant to planning, and MRP is going to run for those. So that's typically what we're running right on a nightly basis is net change MRP. Okay? The three different types, net change, net planning, and NUPL. Net change we talked about. Net planning is saying you can run MRP but in a planning horizon. I only want to run it for the next 120 days. You set a horizon on there. I don't see that as much. Usually, typically, net change just runs, you know, for the whole horizon.
What would be the purpose for
Net planning. For somebody, you just don't want to generate out that far. Could be performance reasons. Could be, look, I don't want to see a whole bunch of planned orders beyond, 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. I don't know, David, you see any other reasons with
That's
net?
about the only reason, yeah.
Yeah, it's just limiting.
It's becoming more and more obsolete. People, don't tend to run that as often as
Right.
you would think.
Especially with the horsepower now, there's not a lot of reason to limit it. But there used to be when MRP would crank through for, an hour and a half with 30,000 materials. Now the databases are so good, you're like, well, why do I want to limit it? The NUPL, any regenerative planning, thoughts on that? What does regenerative planning do? What's that? Excuse me.
Plans for all materials.
Regenerative wipes the slate clean. Basically says, I don't care what's in the planning file, I'm planning everything. Housekeeping, I'm planning everything, and everything's being deleted, and all planned orders are being deleted, and everything's being deleted and wiped out. We're doing our spring cleaning, and we're wiping the slate clean and replanning everything. And that's good to run once a month.
We run it once a week on weekends,
Okay.
And every day for Kent.
and every day for Ken.
Any
that's
reason for that with Kent?
That's eating into your number ranges in a big way, right?
Yeah, any reason?
Yeah.
Any reason we need to do that or in Kent that they saw?
Goes way back shortly after the implementation. They had problems with net change. I probably can't explain because I'm not the person that
Yep.
mandated it.
Yeah, a lot of horsepower, and like I said, you're chewing up the numbers in there, and yeah, usually once a month is enough for that. Sometimes sometimes once a week, but usually I see it monthly.
Planning something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was their fix.
Okay. Okay, so those are basically the three type, net change being the most common that's running all the time, and then periodically regenerative to wipe the slate clean, to pick up anything we might not have seen in a net change. Once in a while, something will be out there, and MRP hasn't run on it in a while, for whatever reason, and you just say, look, I want an MRP to run on this. So that's what NUPL's doing. Okay, so the design, nightly net change, once a week or month, and net planning. So we're pretty much doing that at this point, running net change nightly, net NUPL once a week or month. Okay, so these are the settings on an MDO3 or MDO2, running it yourself. I think what I saw in your planning run is that you always generate requisitions, right? You don't generate requisitions in the opening period. It's recs always, and you essentially have schedule lines always, and you have planning mode, adaptive planning. How about this scheduling indicator, 1 or 2? Okay.
Except for Don Juan.
Okay.
Don Juan won't use their routings for scheduling right now.
Okay.
I mean, that also means no capacity planning for them.
So what, yeah, what if we set it to 1? What is that, what do we lose when we set it to 1?
It needs good routers, doesn't it?
So what does 1 do? 1 says basic dates, I don't even need routings. Go use my time in the material master of 2 days, and you don't get any capacity planning. If you're not scheduling through your routings and you're running basic date scheduling, forget about capacity planning, because you're not going to get it with the 1. So 1 is not using your routings, will not generate capacity requirements. So you don't see it used very much because you lose things when you lose functionality when you use a 1. But some plants say, I'm doing capacity planning somehow else, just use basic date scheduling, it's the crudest, go look at my material master, this says it takes 5 days to make, and that's what it does. But as you get down the learning curve, get your routings accurate, get the times accurate, then this is a 2, then it schedules using the routings, and you get capacity planning. So that's generally 2 is usually what you see. Okay, control fields, so NETCH we've talked about, that's what we're generally doing. Schedule lines, we always have our schedule lines, which is, any sales orders, purchase order, we have schedule lines all the time. And we have basically purchase requisitions always, I think, in your current setup. Okay. Opening period, if you use it, and I don't think you're using it here much with procurement, it just kind of says, I have this safety opening period, and when things start to fall in that opening period, turn them from planned orders to requisitions. If you're not using really the opening period, and here you always generate requisitions, so it really doesn't really apply. Opening period can be used in production, for example, that when your planned order start dates fall in that opening period, that's the time you need to get them converted to production orders. So an opening period just gives you a heads up kind of that start date is coming. If you had a 3-day opening period, it means get my planned order into a production order in advance of when it actually has to start. Yes?
Is that a default days, or is it, you said 5 days, I think?
You set the opening period in your scheduling margin key.
Okay.
So you have a scheduling margin key. If the scheduling margin key is 000, that means there's no opening period. But the scheduling margin key can control that number of days, and also if you use floats before and after, the scheduling margin key controls your floats and your opening period.
All right.
Yep. So I don't know how many scheduling margin keys you have, but I didn't really see much in the way of an opening.
We have like 8 or 9
Of
We have
them?
a bunch of different profiles, and then we have the float before and after.
Yep. Yep. So depending on
Period for anybody.
Yep. So depending on the scheduling margin key, you may get a opening period, and then if you go into collective conversion, CO41 or whatever, and you put an opening period, it'll drive you to convert those orders sooner.
Peter had alluded to it yesterday, how we've been creating out to get visibility and stuff. I've been trying to use CO41 to do opening period by MRP controller and order type
Yep.
to try and start converting that way.
Yep.
I've just had the opening period is like the start date because we don't have that margin in there.
Right. So the opening period, without it, it becomes the start date. If you want it to push it, put an opening period of 2 or 3 days. That'll get you converted sooner in CO41. Yep. Okay. So there's just an example, the opening period. When that purchase rec falls in the opening period, that means it needs to get to, that planned order needs to get to a requisition, but you're already set to create requisitions no matter what the opening period basically is. Because some companies will say, look, leave them as planned orders going out 5-6 months, but in the next month, I don't want to see any planned orders for buys, I want them recs. Or I want to see recs the whole horizon. MRP could deal with recs. So here we're basically saying just make them recs. I don't want to see planned orders and then recs without, after the opening period, just make them recs. Okay. Okay, same way with planned orders. When they fall in that opening period, that's going to fall in your window for CO41 to get you converted. Okay. Same with recs. Schedule lines, we're only doing, delivery schedule lines, we're always creating schedule lines in the setting. Okay. Adaptive planning, this is normal. It basically says, hey, if I need to re-explode the bomb, I will. we've seen some folks, some companies set the planning mode to like, re-explode bomb and routing, and it's going through and exploding like every bomb on everything. So it's almost like a regen. So we don't generally advise that, to re-explode bomb and routing in every run, because it could just create more exception messages. Usually this setting, adaptive planning, is good enough. MRP's smart enough to know when it has to re-explode requirements based on a change in the planning situation. You don't want to force it to re-explode all the time. So usually this is your recommended setting. Okay, and then your MRP list, we want our MRP list, we want our MD06. So we always set that, yes, create MRP list. Okay. Scheduling, we just talked about lead time scheduling, capacity planning. That's a 2. That means schedule through my routings and generate capacity requirements. If I don't use 2, CMO1 becomes useless. You don't have any capacity requirements. So obviously that says your routings ought to be pretty good in terms of generating your schedule. If your routings are poor, your data in them regarding scheduling is poor, then your capacity planning is not going to be, and your scheduling is going to be off. Sure.
So if you're not using that, then it'll revert to the in-house production days?
In-house production days. Yep.
So, just question, all the plants are using 2, 1, or just all the plants here?
Everybody's using 2 except for Dong 1, who's using 1.
Because their routings aren't.
In general, I mean, as soon as I open the screen, it says 1. I don't know if it's...
You haven't changed your default settings.
Oh,
You can
okay.
change your default settings and
Yep.
go to the menu, and there's a save function to save your default settings.
When you go into MD02,
13112 is...
put your settings and hit setting save, and then it saves them, right?
Same for the rest. I mean, just in case that someone is creating an item, if the default is 1, it's just about just to understand that basically.
Is it by item or is it by site?
No, it's just by your plant.
Yeah.
Plant.
It's at the plant level.
Plant.
If your plant setting is done, then it applies to all parts.
Okay.
Right. You go into MD02, it's for your whole plant.
Okay. So with the plant down, it's with the 2. Okay.
They don't set it well. It
Yep.
doesn't set automatically.
If you go into MD02, you can set your settings, then you hit settings save,
Just in case that someone...
and you're good for that. For that, when you run MRP. MRP at night's already set. Yep. So when you come in, MD02, do your settings, you'll have a plant, then say settings save, and you won't have to set it again.
Because sometimes...
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, we okay with that? Yep, because your nightly MRP run is set up with the correct settings, but if you're running it ad hoc, you kind of want the same settings, as a nightly batch job. Okay. Lot sizing, really important. So it has a lot of effect on how these red line graphs look. So we'll talk about 3 lot sizing: static, periodic, and optimum. Any thoughts? Static lot sizing. What do we think that is? Correct. It's going to be FX, right? Fixed. Every time I make you see a lot of this in some of your food or pharma that are batch controlled. If I've got a container and I make, 1,000 gallons, and that's what I'm regulated for, 1,000 gallons, I got to make 1,000 gallons. I can't make 1,200 gallons in a 1,000-gallon tank. So every time I do that, unless I'm allowed to make less, I have a fixed lot size. My batch is 1,000 gallons. So FX, and you may have some of that when I buy something or make something, I'm stuck into a fixed lot size. So that's your FX. Periodic lot sizing is a lot for, especially with procurement. I want to buy this once a month. I want to buy this every 2 weeks. I want to buy this on a Thursday. So I want to buy this on the 3rd Thursday of a month. I want to buy it every Thursday. So periodic lot sizing, MRP smart enough, it groups up those requirements and says, when do you want to buy it? first of the month, last of the month, every Thursday. So you get into, because sometimes in purchasing, I go, if MRP were left to its own devices, it would order it on a Monday, next Thursday, the following Tuesday, and then Friday. That's when MRP needs it. And you go, I'm not doing that. You know, it's too many requisitions, too many purchase orders. I want to buy this once a month. Gather up all those requirements and give me a requisition on the first of the month. And it covers the whole month. Now that could have other implications. Maybe I'm buying it too early, that's too much inventory, but maybe I want to buy it every Monday, weekly. So I can set up weekly lot sizing, monthly lot sizing using a planning calendar, all those type of things are more periodic lot sizing.
You got a question up front?
Can you set that forward or backwards, so I want to order it on this day or I want to receive it on these days?
Yeah, there's an order versus receipt, something in there, yeah. As to when, like if you have a vendor who's always delivering on a Thursday or something like that, yeah, there's ways in the planning calendar and such, you can set that up for periodic, yeah.
So if I have, like, say I run my shopping list on
Your
yesterday,
grocery list
my
on,
grocery list yesterday, and then like the very next day, here's new one, still to be released that week, even though I've already run it out. So if I set it, say I only want my recs for Tuesdays, then if another rec is generated, it's not going to be generated in, I mean, it's not going to tell me to release it until the following Tuesday when I run my list again.
yeah, it's just saying, that's it, gather up the requirements, and I want them on Tuesday. So it'll look at the rest of the week, or whatever that horizon is, and say if it's weekly, gather those up Tuesday. Gather up the next week's, yeah, Tuesday. It's doing the grouping. Yeah, because it helps with, you know, a lot of procurement. You're going, you know, I don't want to be ordering this things different days, 4 times during whatever. Once, you know, once a month maybe not enough, or maybe it is, or once a week is good enough. But I want to control when that is in that, yeah, in the week. So you can get into using planning calendars and such. And certain companies, you know, you get DuPonts and such, where they go, hey, this big train of tank cars arrives on Tuesday. I can't control that. That's when they're delivering these chemicals. So my planning calendar better say there's Tuesdays are those deliveries. So you set your ordering patterns such that it fits when your vendor is going to deliver. Because when you get into rail and things like that, it's not as flexible as just putting something on a truck and it can show up anytime. When you get into cargo ships and rail, you've got definite planning calendar delivery dates. So that's where periodic lot sizing and planning calendars can be used. Yeah.
So I don't know if we'll cover this when we get into repetitive manufacturing and Kanban, but I'm just kind of thinking this from a production standpoint. We want to kind of get to a hijunka scheduling with our Kanbans. Would that be something that you could use in a repetitive manufacturing?
Yeah, we should be able, when we look at repetitive, I mean, repetitive works hand in hand with Kanban as your, you know, your pull lists and such. So repetitive and Kanban, there is Kanban in SAP. SAP has its own version of Kanban that works with repetitive.
Yeah, we've taken a look at it
Yeah.
here recently, actually.
Yeah.
A suggestion for using that one for something that is not in the BOM. Let's say that I want to buy something periodically that is, it could be MRO, it could be something that is out of the bill of material. It could be reorder bonds that install, what could be the trigger for making the purchase.
Usually with the MRO, I've seen more order point, right? And you're still, it's not a stock item, so it's quantity managed but not value managed, right? So if you still run MRP and then, you know, it has a trigger point based on reorder point. Now, could you use a planning calendar and stuff for that?
No,
Yeah,
not with reorder point. You
Yeah.
can't use planning calendar.
Yeah, because now you have to have MRP.
Yeah.
But reorder point, that's your trigger.
Yeah, because sometimes we are using the safety stock as a trigger, but the only that is causing that one is exception messages. Because
Yeah,
it's all the time you are behind the demand.
Right,
You need to,
right.
You need to cover.
Right. That was, reorder point should use a reorder point,
Yeah.
not a safety stock.
Right.
Exactly. So
exactly, yeah.
we've seen that one of our last client there.
I think we're doing reorder point today, right, Nick? No, tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's
So reorder point, the safety stock's within your reorder point. So we want to kind of get away from like using a 40 strategy and then just putting a safety stock and that's our reorder point. That's kind of, if you're going to use order point, use a real reorder point. Yep. Okay, so the lot sizing procedures, SAP has a bunch of them. Dynamic lot for lot, fixing and splitting. There's your MB, monthly lot sizing. PK, that's your lot sizing according to the planning calendar. So when I have PK, that's when it says, okay, where's your planning calendar? When's your dates that you want it? So that one's a big one, is lot sizing according to planning calendar. Or you could have TB, daily lot sizing, MB, monthly lot sizing. Those don't really need a planning calendar because it's just going to determine first of the month or last of the month. And so you can create your own too. So SAP, it's got a lot of lot sizing options. You can have EX, but EX is basically lot for lot. But usually EX is used more with make to order because you have to use EX means whatever that sales order comes in for, that's what I'm going to make. But you can use EX even with make to stock EX and say, hey, I have a min, max, and rounding value. So in make to stock, you can use EX, but you want to put parameters around not EX and wide open because it'll order 52 gallons and you only get 50-gallon drums. So you're going to get dumb suggestions from MRP going, okay, order 52. Well, I can't. It's a 50-gallon drum. Well, then your min might be 50 gallons. You could set a max, and then your rounding value would be 50. So I don't get planned orders or requisitions that look dumb, and then I'm having to change them before they go out. So if you use EX, you got to think, what's my min, max, or rounding value on that? So when I get suggestions in MRP, they make sense without me intervening and changing them. So even with EX, usually EX and blank is not a good idea unless it's a make-to-order, finished good. You want to think about EX and what qualifiers on there. What's the min? Vendors might not want an order under a certain amount. Do you want a max and do you want a rounding value? Okay. Static, that's usually your fixed lot size, is the or replenishment up to maximum stock level. That's what you use with your HB, kind of your order points. Okay.
Has anybody ever used FS?
Fixing, splitting.
I've used splitting through taking the work order and actually manually splitting, but never setting it up
That way.
as a
Okay.
lot size.
That procedure. Okay.
We use splitting and overlapping, but we don't control it through the lot size. We're controlling through the material master based on the size of the orders.
Okay.
What about HB? No? Okay.
We
well,
have some.
we have some HBs.
Only a few.
Few.
Okay, because one of the things that SAP recommends is that HB is used with reorder point planning.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one thing that Nick's going to go over tomorrow in terms of.
We've done some reorder point, but we typically use the fixed lots.
FX? Right.
Right, yeah. FX and HB are the two
FX and
recommended.
HB are the two that are recommended with reorder point. Either replenish to a maximum stock or every time order fixed. Okay. Periodic, we talked about a little bit. So you have your monthly posting period, lot size according to planning calendar, PK, daily lot size, weekly lot size. So, a lot of those can really help us so we're not over ordering and we're not, driving our dead stock up. This contributes to that heartbeat. This is where we want the order, we want a nice heartbeat consumption. We don't want giant replenishments and the graph going like this, because then that drives our average inventory up. So we want to see a nice heartbeat, and kind of usually smaller is better, because when you have these massive ordering swings, it lasts you too long. So usually you want a lower heartbeat at a decent place on the graph so we don't run out, but we're not way up here increasing our dead stock. So lot sizing has a lot to do with that heartbeat, and then we have to look at safety stock and ordering patterns to say, now we got the heartbeat, how do we bring it down so it's not way up here, as David was showing in his other graphs. So that's the key to getting the red line graphs where we want them. Then optimizing, these I don't see too much because they're heavily, heavily dependent on having really good cost data for this graph and least cost. They're really, really finicky around the cost component. And most folks are like, I can't tell you within pennies what all these costs are that drive these. And if you don't get those right, you get all kind of crazy suggestions with these. So I don't see those being used very much
I've
because
actually
they're too
never seen them
cost
used,
sensitive. Yeah, that's been okay. Anything else? This is just going through the planning file consistency check. That's just something you can run periodically. SAP will look through, it'll look through your obsolescence and then say, hey, wait a minute, these don't really belong in your planning file, we're going to delete them. So it's something that administratively we should run every once in a while, the consistency check. That's it. Questions?
So for the lot sizing according to the planning calendar, do you have to create a new calendar or do you go off your existing one?
Create planning calendars. They're not factory calendar, you create planning calendars. Yep, they're config. Some, I think there's an OSS note that can actually make planning calendars master data, just like an MRP controller. You're like, why is that config? It doesn't do anything, right? But MRP controllers are config. So SAP, there's an OSS note, just like with planning calendars. If I don't want to have to go into the IMG, SAP, I think, has an OSS note that makes planning calendars, you know, because planning needs to create planning calendars. They don't do anything until you attach them to material. So for now, you probably have to go to the IMG unless we add the OSS note, then it makes them like master data. So you create your planning calendar, Tuesday, 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 and then you attach it. And when you put the PK, it makes you put a planning calendar, and then that's what it'll use when MRP runs. So yeah, you have to create planning calendars.
And you can use them for scheduling as well in terms of the MRP run for semi-finished goods and those kind of things, you know. So you can go into the actual configuration and say, I want to use this to schedule production on a Tuesday or whatever. Yeah, so there's that ability to be able to do them as well as purchasing.
Yeah, I've seen them most used in purchasing, but use them both. Usually purchasing is because when I want to create, you know, purchase orders, when my vendor delivers, I want order on Tuesday, but just same thing as in a plant. Yep.
So that, you know, for your, what did you say, high junker wheel, right, in terms of the fact that, you know, it's almost like a campaign, right? I want to do these on these certain days and those kind of things. Yeah, that can fit into that if we get it right. Yeah. And if you're good at plan, schedule, and actual, right? Because obviously high junker depends on the fact that your shop floor can achieve the plan that you've asked them to actually do, right?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, because if they don't, then you're just continuously rescheduling all the time.
I'm curious to see how that's going to fit with the Kanban repetitive manufacturing.
Okay. Yeah, repetitive, like I said, is I mean, in the true repetitive world, your Kanbans are visible, right? They're just cards. But Kanban in the repetitive world, your replenishment either is based on a pull list, you know, like MF60 and running a pull list, or Kanban replenishment, electronic Kanban, where you use more scanning. This is empty, you scan it, SAP then generates whatever it needs to do to fill that container. So SAP has an electronic Kanban, which is just kind of the same version as a card Kanban.
And I think that we are not really exploring all the benefits of this one because we were just talking about, for example, for purchasing, if we have single requirement by day, it could be by weeks, the consolidation of the shipment for freight is a huge improvement just because it needs to start asking the supplier for shipping something that I need to receive on Friday, something to receive on Monday, something to receive on Tuesday. In that way, just to try to consolidate, be just 1 week, 2-3 days, and we can start seeing also problem. Not in the amount only for the PO that we have, the PO requisition that we're going to have, the consolidation of the four. Buyers are going to be handling 1 through 3 POs for a week or for instead to have tracking a lot of POs.
Yeah, a lot of times, I mean, MRP left to do it at once. It's just going to pick its day when it needs it. And usually the driver's bringing it a little bit early. You know, you obviously don't want to be late, but you go, look, if I order this once on Monday, I'm good. Take those requirements, whatever, versus ordering Monday, then Thursday, and then one on Friday. You know, like that's just kind of crazy. Too much admin. You know, you're just creating unnecessary. Usually, if I'm in that week, I'm good. You know, unless I'm scheduling like just in time. You're like, give me one for the week, and I'm good. So that's where periodic can help you out.
So we run MRP. When do we run MRP again? I missed the
right after midnight.
Right after midnight. So that's across every plant, right? We run Yeah, everything. Cool. So when you come in, how many people actually then, as part of your daily jobs, start to use MRP in terms of the fact that, hey, I want to do this, change that, and then rerun MRP, you know, single level, you know, or you know, multi-level? Do a lot of people go in there and actively change a lot and just keep running it during the day?
It depends. I mean, I don't say that I run it constantly, but if I have to do a bunch of changing of quantities, you know, because I buy wire cable, so it's all in feet, so it's not as simple as in each, then I might run MRP to make sure that what I have is lining up, things like that. But I maybe once or twice on a material a day, and that's it.
So it's not a huge amount then.
No.
That's what I'm trying to gauge, you know, I mean, because if people are running MRP all the time, then obviously there's something wrong, right? Yeah, and you know, it's a healthy check to make sure that, yeah, I run it 1, 2, 3 times a day and then I'm good, you know, but if you do that every day from the, you know, we want to reduce the amount of times that you run MRP because we want to be able to actually start to really stabilize things, yeah. But of course, you know, MRP, you know, I always call it dumb. Yeah, because it is. It's a relentless machine that just keeps telling you, hey, you got to get this right. You got to get this right. You got to get this right. It is merciless. And of course, from a shop floor perspective, yeah, from a purchasing perspective, if my vendor doesn't give me what I need, or if my shop floor doesn't make what I want, then I always have those residuals that, you know, MRP just latches onto and starts actually saying, yeah, you need more. You need more. You need more. Yeah. Okay. So, do you find that a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're looking to curb that now, I think we got the EHQ where we're going to start looking at and trying to prevent our scrap factors from constantly changing planned orders around. But whenever they make a confirmation and they've had a scrap event or something, then our production order is going to drop. It's going to regenerate a planned order, which is going to explode all the way down to purchasing. So we're going to try and prevent that with, I think it was the first action we had on Monday.
Right. Setting in the production scheduling profile, essentially. Yep. Right. By setting that, it says basically, don't really show my variance up in that header of the order. Assume I'm getting 1,000, and then if I confirm under that, don't show the other, you know, 200 dangling out there, and create another planned order. So until that order is done, then MRP would run again and say, well, now you're short, but not while that order's in partial confirmation.
Do you need 5?
A lot, essentially. We have the measures that we have, because I think that as well as Nagales is making, cleaning up all the work order that has been planned because it's requesting material that we will need. That's why purchasing is ignoring the message because it's just a balance. So
Right.
Do we have a volunteer? I mean, this presentation is not an hour and a half type of
Just
thing, so you
starting
may
in,
have some
ladies,
found
but
time,
just
but I
let you
wanted
know.
to maybe have somebody just come up, drive, we'll do an MDO2, set your settings in there. We can maybe run MRP and then go back to MDO6, you know, for that, and then you'll see that MRP for that material, or MDO5, you'll see the date change because you ran MRP. So any volunteer for an MRP driver?
Who did it yesterday? You drove yesterday, right? Yeah.
I got it.
So let's say a volunteer from, you know, Nogales, say. Yeah.
Drive by, yeah.
Excellent. We got a volunteer.
I'm only just getting used to the concept of drive-through. You know, and I've been here 10 years. It's like there's not enough room in England to drive through anything.
Okay. Welcome.
Excuse me, mate.
Thanks, Mom.
Remember throwing in Adam and the bus? Just remember it was 2 of us.
Right.
It's always his fault.
Okay. So if we run our MD02, which is our single item multi-level, and so we'll have our material we want to run it. We have a favorite material that you memorized, and then our plant. You don't need to put your plant, go down one, put plant. We don't need MRP. MRP error is fine, but 19. Okay, so now our settings. So purchase requisitions, that's fine. Schedule lines, MRP list, adaptive planning, 2. So this is where we would set, and if you go up to settings, so once we set our 13112 settings, save. Okay, and then it says, please check input parameters, hit enter. Okay, selection parameters were saved. So now you don't have to do this again. So anybody that's running MD02, set them, and then you're good. So then if you hit enter again, and again, okay, so then MRP runs. Now if you went to MD05, which is what your single for that material, MD05. For that same material, enter. Okay, MRP list as of there. So you see the date on the top. So that basically tells you, because if you go into MD06, it's going to, most times when you're looking at your exceptions, it's going to be 2 a.m. or whatever, the last time MRP ran. So as soon as you run to MD02 for that, you're going to get a new, you can tell, you're going to get a new date and time as of when you last ran MRP for that material. So that's kind of refreshing the results. You know, so if you make a change on MD06 and you drill in, you either have to look at it on MD04, or if you run an MRP, you're going to get a new MD06 essentially, a new MD05, because you just ran MRP, you know, for that. So that's essentially what it does is you are running it material by material until the plant runs. So if you do make a change and you run MRP, you'll get a new MD05 and 6, or you can see those results right in MD04 also. Okay.
Mark, I noticed that there's a single item interactive up there as
Yes.
well as push buttons. Interactive MRP. That does anybody use that? You don't. Nobody has access.
It doesn't save it until you say it goes through the results, and if you don't like them, you back out. And then if you like it, it gives you a chance to save it. If you don't, it's running it, and you go, oh, okay, no.
And you can change it, right?
Yeah.
That's the interactive piece.
Does everybody have that navigation window up there? Do we know how to set that? Okay, let's go in. There's a couple different ways. Let's go into settings. Settings again. Then all the way over to the general G. Okay, so now under navigation profile, that's where it has MRP controller. And if you do the drop down there, these are the SAP standard ones. And there could be one for a buyer, for example. So once you pick the one like MRP controller, those icons will pop up on MD04 and such to run MRP right from that screen. And we can create new ones if you want. So if you tell us, I want these 5 icons at the top of my screen, create purchase order, do this, look at, look at PIRs. Yeah. So look at the buyer one. Let's see, this is what comes up standard. And then hit green check. Okay, click buyer. Green check here. We don't want to save it, just a green check. No. Green check, yep. Okay.
Nothing there.
Nothing on the
buyer one.
Okay. Right. But typically a buyer would have things, icons the buyer wants to see. So essentially, if you can tell us what icons you want to see, we'll put them there, and then that navigation profile, you can just pick it, and all buyers, you'll get icons at the top. So if you pick MRP controller again in the settings, you'll see which ones it has.
Mark, we got a question here.
Okay.
Not a
And then
question,
pick the MRP controller.
In MDO4, there is a toolbar for a buyer,
Okay.
but I don't like it.
You don't like
So
it?
I told everybody to use the MRP controller.
Okay. But if we want one for a buyer, let's configure one for a buyer. If you can get everybody to say, these are the 4 or 5, I think it's limited to like 5 or something, but if you can tell us, these are the 5 things I want to be able to do based on an icons, we'll just configure them in the buyer one. And we can create as many as you want, MRP controller 2, MRP 3, buyer 1, buyer 2.
Well, we never did anything for 6 because we don't usually use 6. Most everything that we do is in 4.
Yeah, yep. But once we have that configured, you can go pick it. So if you can get together and say, what icons does a buyer want, we'll configure them. We'll show you how to configure them. You maybe already know how to configure them, and then you can just pick that profile, and you'll get, because it's so much easier than having to get out of the screen, go to MDO2, come back. I want to be able to run MRP right on MDO4 and hit refresh. And that's what you can do when you have it. So let's pick the MRP controller, settings. Let's go pick the MRP controller from the drop down here, next to buyer. Nope, down one. All right, click, drop down, MRP controller, and then hit save here, or check. Okay, now they pop up. So now I can go look at the planning file, I can create a planned order, I can run MRP right from here and never have to leave the screen. I run MRP, hit refresh, and I never have to leave this. I don't have to go to another screen to do that. So those are a big help. So a lot of times with clients, we'll have a bunch of these navigation profiles configured, because MDO4, you can do just about anything from MDO4. I can go to the material master. If you go up in the environment, I can go change material, environment, look at material. So MDO4 is like a cockpit where between your navigation profiles and the menu, you can do a whole lot and never leave that screen. It's a central.
That's what it's designed for.
Yeah, that's the way SAP kind of designed it, that I don't need 5 sessions open. I can branch and come back and do a whole lot. So navigation profiles are a help. So if you want those and you can agree what does a buyer want, what does an MRP controller want, we can configure basically whatever you want, and you'll see up to 5 or 6 icons on the top will come across there. I know purchasing sometimes it's like drill down to PIR or something like that, or create PO or whatever, and run MRP also. So, yes?
Is there a list of all the things that you could possibly put up there, or is it just you plug a T code to it?
Yeah, it's kind of like the T code, concept, but you're limited to how many can go. Like you can't have 10 icons, but if you could say, view purchase info record or something, and we have that T code, then likely we can find that. That's what I've seen. I haven't seen any limitations, but yeah. There's a way folks can do it themselves interactively. That gets a little, there's a way to do that, to set up your own menus, but that gets a little more complicated, and then everybody has all different ones. It's almost like, hey, for the planning group, we want these 5, for purchasing, we want these 5. You just go pick a profile. As soon as you start building your own, then it gets a little crazy. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
How about some lessons learned then? This one working?
In the red.
Just learned that.
First
Okay,
lesson.
so let's start at the beginning. What did we learn today about MRP? Planning calendars, great. Sounds like everybody got a bit excited about planning calendars and the potential there, right? And yeah, so what was Mark talking about that led us to planning calendars?
The MDO2 options, what the different numbers mean.
MDO2 options, so you've got different selection criteria, right? MDO2 But he said something about, you know, the 3 different types of these. You know, you've got a fixed type, you've got a dynamic type. Yeah, what was he referring to in terms of? Lot sizes, right, exactly. So, and that's obviously what led us down the road in terms of being able to actually go and see those. So, lot sizing, as Mark said, is a massive part of what we do in terms of optimizing materials, because, you know, he's quite right in the fact that it affects what you purchase, it affects what you manufacture, it affects your inventory. Yeah. Okay, so, but it's all run by MRP. Now, what is MRP? Right. But I used a word.
Dumb?
Dumb. Yeah. MRP is dumb. Right? And it needs to be, right? Why does it need to be? It needs to keep you straight, right? It needs to keep you straight because it's not capable of thinking. It's just capable of calculating against the data that's in the system, right? We do not want it to think. We want it to be relentless. We want to hate it. We want to think that it's the world's worst thing because it just keeps annoying me. But I have to do something with the output. And that's what MRP is there for. It is the core of what we do. Yeah, it's the core of what we use to be able to do what we do, because it gives us so much. Even though it's dumb, and we like it like that, okay, we don't want it thinking for us. We want it because it's a tool, right? Yeah, it's a tool that helps us do our jobs. We affect the use of that tool by things like lot sizing, yeah, okay, by the MRP data, by the parameters that we actually put into the system. We are responsible for the output of MRP. It is not responsible for it. Yeah. It does what you ask, and that's what we want, because then that's how we can look and say, yeah, we need something in terms of accountability, because it's not MRP's fault, it's not SAP's fault. Yeah, it's the data inside the system, and who owns that data? We do. Yeah, and that's why we want MRP to act the way that it does, yeah? Because then we can start to use it to our advantage in terms of saying, that actually doesn't do or give me the result that I really want. And then I can go in and start optimizing that material. If it does, great. You know, and there are techniques like Marcus just talked about in terms of being able to stop certain things that are occurring at this moment in time, right? Constantly getting those little balances and all that kind of stuff, you know? Yeah, there's a way to get rid of all of that. There's a way to actually help, you know, the system, or should I say, there's a way to get the system to help us, right? Yeah, so anything else that we learned today? Types of MRP runs, great. Do you remember what those 3 are? Oh, 4 or 5? Oh, not giving it away. Net change? Yep.
Regeneration.
Total regeneration? Arnold Schwarzenegger hasn't made a film about that yet. I'm sure he will, right? Total regen. And what was the other one? Net planning on the horizon. Net change with the planning horizon, right? Net planning horizon. Anything else that we learned? Toolbars. What did we learn about the toolbars? It's fresh in our minds, right?
Customizable shortcut.
Customizable. Not an S, right? A Z or a Z. Customizable. That'll do. We know what it means. Okay. Right, so we've learned about toolbars, we learned about customizing, we've learned a lot of good things, but there are a lot of other things that we haven't mentioned yet in terms of, you know, let's just talk about those selection criteria. What do we learn from the selection criteria? Anything? We spoke a lot about, you know, a particular selection criteria that everybody uses apart from Nogales. Which one's that? The scheduling criteria, right? Okay. And now, you know, Mark explained that you need your routings to be able to be accurate, to use it. What I'm hearing is that, you know, maybe in Nogales we need to look at those routings, or maybe we start running 2 and to see what the output is. Yeah, because one of the things that we do is learning by doing. Okay, so if we say, well, we don't think that they're right, well, let's go and find out if they are actually right. Yeah, okay, and the only way that you can do it is by doing it, right? Yeah, so change that parameter, run that, see what output you get. Yeah, that's called looking, that's called understanding, and then it's called optimizing, yeah, because we're going to be working with you on that. Yeah? So even though we think it's not good data, we need to go and prove that it's not good data. It's just like everything that we're going to do. Okay? So that's LBD, learn by doing. Anything else? Did we learn about the sequence of MRP? Yeah? Did we learn anything about what's in the background? Planning file. Yeah, great. I will start a new page. What is the planning file?
Where the changes go.
Where the changes go, I like that. Yeah, well, it's a repository for change, right? What constitutes a change?
Change the master data.
What? Master data, inventory. Anything else?
Could be date change.
Could be a date change, yeah. Mm-hmm. Any change, right. So the planning file is MRP's way of storing that. When we run net change, it says, if you're not in that planning file, I am not going to bother with you. Yeah, okay. So, anything else? All right, well, that's a segue into what do you think that you'll start doing differently? Wow. That's all right, MRP wow. Right?
Well, for sure we're going to go to the basics and start working with the rest of the planners, making sure that they understand the parameters and start playing with them.
Fantastic.
Start doing this.
Roll your sleeves up, right? Get in there. Yeah.
A comment on that. You know, we do have a test system if you did want to see how something's going to react. You don't have to always play in production.
No, you don't always have to play in production, but you know, when you want to see how accurate the information is, generally it's the production environment that has the information. Yeah. But if you've got a test system that's current, you know, one company that I work with used to have what they called YAP, okay, which stood for yet another production. And basically it was a copy of production every 12 hours for that exact reason. Yeah, you know, they would copy production every 12 hours. And then, you know, everybody who had authorization could dive in there, sort out any issues with real live current data. Yeah, so, you know, but not a lot of people offer that. So it's good. I don't think there's anything wrong with changing a parameter to 2, running it on one individual material, and then saying, oh, that output is way not what it's supposed to be. Oh, hey, that looks really good. Yeah, okay, yeah, because you can put it back to 1, rerun MRP, and you get the same instance. Yeah, right, so. No mass changes, right, yeah? No mass.
What else? Anything else we're going to do differently?
buyer, I would have on my racks, I would try to get everything on one day, like you were saying, schedule it.
So you're looking to say, okay, I'm going to start thinking about different lot sizing approaches.
What I need
Yeah.
for the week, just have it one day and go to the grocery store.
Anything else? No, we are doing a complete session on lot sizing, so that's not something that we will ignore, because as we know, it's extremely important. Yeah, we'll go through that, absolutely. Anything else that we learned? Anything else that we changed that we would do differently with MRP?
There's no actions out of this one?
I don't think there any actions have come from this, yeah? I mean,
When we were first talking about the Kanban and stuff, that was brought up, MF60, what does that do?
okay, so MF60 basically is what we call the pull list in repetitive manufacture, and what it is a shop floor replenishment tool that basically says, here's all of my planned orders in terms of repetitive. These are all the requirements for those planned orders. I run MF60 and it goes away and says, you need to replenish this storage location with this amount of material. Yeah, so it's a very simple calculator that says there's X amount of ingredients or stock in this storage location. There's this planned order that needs this amount, just does the maths and says, take from here and move it to here, this amount. Yeah. So it's the repetitive replenishment to shop floor, which is, there's also material staging using production orders or warehouse management as well, yeah, which is that next level of granularity in terms of transfer from warehouse to the shop floor. Yeah, it's that shop floor control piece.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
No actions?
Those not actions?
There are actions, you're right, yeah, in terms of what you personally want to do, but there was no actual actions coming out of this particular in terms of being able to, to go away and reconfigure something or come back with an answer for something or anything like that, yeah. Okay, so in that case.
The only one we kind of touched on was the reconfiguration for by role for the icons on the top of the screen.
Navigation profile.
Yeah, I thought you would have jumped all over that one in terms of, yeah, I'm going to go and, add to my MRP screens, MD04, MD06, those buttons that make life easier, because as Mark said, once you go into MD04, that's where you're going to live. You don't want to be opening 5 or 6 sessions, yeah, when you can just click a button, it takes you there, we push the green arrow, and it brings you back again. Yeah, so, in terms of that, the navigation from one transaction to another. MD06, MD05, MD04, and MD07, right? You can do them all in all of those transactions.
And if, from an action item perspective, David, do we want to take an action item to help set up those configurations by role? I think Mark talked about that a couple of times.
That's a great idea, yeah. We'll take an action item on that. So I'll write that down. Where's my pen? Let's put a line here and talk about actions. Configure MD04 profiles.
Assign it to Patrice.
And that will be assigned to Mark. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think you've got about 7 minutes back today.
Of your life.
We are continuing our education. Patrice, you're next, if I'm right?
I am.
Yeah.
LIS will be next.
Logistics Information System. So just a quick one. Do a lot of people use LIS apart from MC.9?
Don't be stealing my thunder.
I'm not. I'm just prepping them for you. Yeah, and the answer looks like no. Okay, thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen.